The Picture of Dorian Gray is a novel portraying selfishness among many other themes. The theme is very much reflected by the book's setting, plot structure, and mostly characterization. It shows how individuals can slowly deteriorate because of the evil lying within themselves. Here are some of the most noticeable instances of selfishness that took place in the novel. Firstly, let's look at the character of Dorian Gray. It all starts with when Dorian sees his portrait. After seeing his picture, Dorian Gray makes an impulsive wish that he could stay young forever and watch the picture grow old instead. This is because Dorian is overjoyed by the recognition of his own beauty. He is afraid of the day when he'll grow old and lose his beauty. This initial train of thought will begin to drive Dorian's actions later on. Next, we can look at Dorian's breakup with Sybil Vane. After Sybil's bad performance, he tells Sybil that he doesn't love her anymore. He goes on in a fit of passion to tell her that she's basically worthless and that he can't believe he ever loved her and wishes he hadn't. Despite Sybil's crying and begging, Dorian coldly breaks up with her. He does not consider her thoughts or motives, only thinking about why he loved her in the first place. This is a clear sign showing Dorian's selfishness which is beginning to emerge. Another example is Basil's murder and what led up to it. After Basil's lecture to Dorian on preserving his good name and comments about being unable to see into Dorian's soul, Dorian gets triggered and shows Basil the painting. Basil now knows his darkest secret, so he cannot let him live. He has seen what a vile man Dorian really is. He hates Basil because he is the reason the painting exists. Dorian blames Basil for the blackness of what his soul has become. Also, he does not like the fact that the painting exists because it is a sign of how criminal and vile he has become. This leads to him stabbing his former friend to death. The day after Dorian murders Basil, he calls Alan Campbell and begs him to get rid of the body for him. Alan refuses, so Dorian threatens to blackmail him. He writes something on a piece of paper and shows it to Alan. Alan suddenly becomes horrified and agrees to help. Dorian was willing to ruin his former friend's life in order to secure his own safety, as he had already done previously with Basil. Later, while Dorian is at the country estate, Dorian's friend Geoffrey Clouston accidentally shoots a man on a hunting trip. Dorian is glad to find out that the dead man is James Vane and even cries tears of joy over his death. He is glad because James's death made him feel safe and ensured that his life is no longer in danger. Instead of showing any sign of sorrow or remorse, Dorian's concern for his own safety immediately overthrows any emotion of the sort and fills him with joy. For our last example focusing on Dorian, we'll look at when he sees what type of person he's become. Eventually, Dorian realizes the horrors the painting displays, and he vows to change his life and be moral and virtuous. Although he tries to do good, the only reason he wanted to do good things was so that he can see positive changes in himself through the painting, not because he is actually a good person. This leads to the painting having a hypocritical smile. Now, although Dorian Gray may have committed several acts of selfishness, it didn't start this way. Lord Henry plays a pivotal role as the major external force that influences Dorian and therefore is responsible for his downfall and destruction. So, let's look a bit at the character of Lord Henry. Lord Henry Wotton is a selfish man who is absorbed with the observance of life at the expense of participation in life. His selfishness not only comes from his actions but from his views as well. He sees himself as separate and detached from the lives around him. He believes superficial beauty is the only thing that matters when you are young and that beauty is a form of intelligence. From his first time meeting Dorian, he becomes impressed by Dorian and becomes his role model. Basil notices this and says to him, "Dorian Gray is my dearest friend. He has a simple and beautiful nature. Don't spoil him. Don't try to influence him." He pleads for Lord Henry not to ruin him, meaning not to take away his innocence with his smooth talking. But Lord Henry ignores Basil's plea and corrupts Dorian's view of himself and changes his self-image completely, not because of spite, but simply for his own entertainment. He doesn't care about how his influence will affect Dorian, he's simply in it for himself. Our next significant moment comes about when Dorian tells Lord Henry about Sybil Vane. When he tells him about Sybil, an actress he has fallen in love with, Lord Henry gives a few remarks and comments about him and his newfound love, implying that he is not ready, and also why Dorian hasn't been paying him enough attention recently. He asks Dorian to dinner, but instead, Dorian insists that he has to go see Sybil perform again. Henry now realizes that Dorian has changed due to Sybil being a part of his life. The night Dorian goes to see Sybil at the theater, Henry stays at home, contemplating to himself about his feelings to Dorian. He believes that Dorian is his creation, since Henry's influence made the boy what he is now. He then goes on to coldly evaluate his creation with Dorian's personality. He does not think of Dorian as human, rather as a kind of lab rat through whom he's trying to figure out the workings of the human soul and body. Lastly, we can look at what Lord Henry thinks when Dorian tells him he's going to change. After James Vane's death, Dorian informs Lord Henry that he's going to become a good person again. However, Lord Henry doesn't want Dorian to change, nor does he think he can change. He thinks that Dorian is perfect the way he is, as he made Dorian to be his tool for pleasure. Overall, selfishness plays a huge role in the tale of Dorian Gray. In this video, we have looked at the two main exhibitors of the theme, Lord Henry and Dorian Gray. Ultimately, the power of selfishness and the will to gain immortality take over Dorian Gray and created an ugly, evil side to him, while Lord Henry was the provider of the ideologies that changed Dorian and experienced the many pleasures through him. However, this change in Dorian Gray leads to some losing their lives, and eventually, Dorian loses his own as well. Thank you for watching our video. We hope you learned a little more about the theme of selfishness in the Picture of Dorian Gray.